it was Trump playing the game, right?
Mm.
If you look at like actual people on the ground and actual people like in downtown LA, like this was like 2 blocks of stuff, and he deployed, the National Guard. He deployed Marines for like the
Mm.
first time in like years, and there is some
1965
slight.
was the last time they did it. Is that correct?
So for the Marines, yes. For the
Okay.
Guard, they actually deployed the Guard in '92. The reason why it's different than
Mm.
'92 is because the governor requested it. So
Yeah, this is this is
also
against the wishes of the local governor.
yes, and it's also against the law, right? Because the
Yeah.
Insurrectionist Act and the Constitution say that this only is supposed to happen if the state requests it, and he
Yeah.
did it without the state requesting it. So it literally will lose. But does that matter? And I think that's the game that Trump is playing, right? He's like, I can
That's
get
been
in
his
there,
thing
I
for
can
a
cause a
while.
state, I can fucking deport these people, and when I deport them, let's say the court overturns it, and
Oh,
then
they're
I can just
gone.
say, oh, they're gone. We can't find them. We can't get them back. And it's like these people's lives are already uprooted and all this kind of shit. So he's just like he's playing a very complicated shell game with this bullshit. And it's like it's the fact that like people don't fully understand. Like a lot of people, like what I saw on the internet was like a lot of people like, well, LA is burning, and it's not. And I think that other than my usual take, which is like, oh, this isn't as bad as I think it is. I think it's really bad because
Oh,
Trump wants you to think LA is burning. He wants you to think LA is burning
as an
because
inspiration for shows of force.
yes,
Yeah.
he wants you to think it's burning
This
because
is
he wants you to
9/11.
think that he did the right thing to deploy the National Guard and the Marines there, despite the fact that the governor and the state legislature or the city government didn't want that. And he wants you to think that it's cool for him to just do that kind of shit. So like
Well, no,
the
it's a
fact
pretty.
that like LA's not burning and he did the shit is
I
insane.
mean,
It would have
as
made
it.
more sense if it was.
I mean, well, yeah, made more sense, but it seems like the obvious play that he's been doing for a while, which has been, the sky is burning kind of take for, since we've been knowing each other, which is that it's an authoritarian play to go, what can I do to create the emergency that gets me anointed as, Emperor Caesar? How do I put my country into a state of emergency that requires a dictator rather than a president? And then I will be that dictator. That seems to have been his playbook for forever. We've got immigrants as a problem. DEI is a problem. They're taking over the country. They're replacing our white men. All of that kind of stuff to go, okay, cool. In order to solve these problems, we need a major consolidation of power in me in order to come in and save the world, whether or not
Yeah.
any of those emergencies actually exist. So
Yeah.
that just seems like a very obvious.
And
Yeah,
I think
there's burning on the fire,
I
man.
don't think I don't think it's that obvious because he could have done all of this without doing that, right? Like he could continue to, like because so here's why I don't think that's obvious.
Okay.
It's because Trump, as a singular force, gets those kind of juices going organically, right? Like he can basically go in like a rally and say like, "Yeah, I'm just going to do this," and people are just like, "Yeah." So he could have taken the Barack Obama route to deportation, and it probably would have scored him more points, and it probably would have strengthened his case to do that. I think that him doing this is why you have 50,000 people in Dallas doing it because now he like I think he is trying to do this thing that you described now, but I'm saying that he didn't need to, which is why it's weird to me.
What do you
And
mean by
and this
need?
is I
Or
think
sorry,
I
finish. Yeah.
think yeah. No, I think that's a logical like thread to pull. I think that if Trump kept the economy relatively afloat, he continued his rhetoric, he continued to do the stuff with DEI, which I think is very powerful for his case. I think that if he just kept that going at like a reasonable clip, then you'd start hearing stuff like his base saying like, "Oh well, is there a way that you can run? Is there a way that you can become vice
Mm,
president and
yeah, yeah.
then JD Vance like step down and then you could be president again because that's legal?" I think you start hearing that kind of stuff like organically. I think him doing this now overplays his hand to a way that you got people in fucking red state saying like this is crazy now. You got people in deep red communities saying like this is crazy now, which is why I think that it's semi out of left field. But I do think that on some level, him being able to control the narrative is driving it in a way that I think keeps the dream alive a little bit longer. But I think that he could have gotten what he wanted, to your point, without doing this, which begs the question: is this as calculated and cunning as people, myself included, initially thought it was? When you're looking at like the flood zone concept and like all that kind of stuff, is it really calculated, or is it just the musings of a madman? Is where we go back to.
I think that you're overestimating the value of. Okay, one, there's a difference between support, like I guess you would maybe say legitimate support from the populace, and power. I think those are two different things. They're related, but they're different things. Like if you have the military,
power versus authority. Yeah.
Yes, if you have the military and nobody voted for you, you're still in charge.
Yes.
And so those two things are different. Two, I think that you maybe overestimate the value of that support relative to that kind of like absolute power. So when I'm looking at this, I'm going, the plan is, or maybe not even the plan, because I don't know that Trump is hyper sophisticated, but to whatever extent he's planning, it's going, well, even if I have a bunch of people who want me to run for a third term, that doesn't get me a third term. Even if 90% of the country wanted him to run for a third term, that doesn't get you a third term. To get a third term, you have to move like legislative shit, like people who are powerful, in order to like tie laws into a knot or get laws overturned in the Supreme Court or whatever the fuck. Or you have to have military power to go, fuck that law, we're not doing that. Like you can tell us we're supposed to do that, we'll just kill you, or we'll just do it anyway, try and stop us. And you have to kind of have that, not just votes, because the votes only work in the kind of legitimated system. So, and this is where maybe I'm giving olive branch for you to fill in where you've got more context than me. I'm looking at Duterte and old boy in fucking Hungary, I forget what his name is, that seem to be the blueprint for this kind of like, they're not Hitler, but they're kind of like, this is this move from democratic system to much more authoritarian system that still kind of operates, where maybe those two, and maybe you would say that they're not blueprints for this, but those two seem to have moved in similar authoritative ways. But at least Duterte seemed like it was through semi-legitimate means rather than military overtake. So I'm kind of making 2 points there, which is whether or not they are similar to him, but also whether or not the blueprint that they followed is one that he is or could be or could use. So those are the two bits to,
Trump's blueprint is Putin.
Okay.
Trump's blueprint is Putin. So Putin has on paper been able to maintain power via Edward.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of my favorite places to go.
The graves of your enemies.
100%. But a strong number two is the barbershop.
True.
Right? And I think that encapsulates the feel that we're trying to get from this podcast. It's a community. We're here to tell you that you can take that community home with you. We've been kind of chopping it up, experimenting with some different formats. But if you like the long form content, that community is a place where you can get access to it. You don't just have to watch the 15 to 20 minute clips. You can watch the full hour 30. You get 10% off of our new card game, In All Seriousness, which is double the cards, double the fun. Also, as a part of the community, you become a part of our inner circle. You can join the Discord, get some barbershop talk in you, have some conversation with like-minded individuals, mostly sane, a bit eclectic. Your boys in and out of there.
We're a little weird. That's true.
We're a little weird, 100%. But it's become something that we're very proud of, that continues to grow. And so make sure that you're locked in and take advantage of the opportunity to take the barbershop home with you. Putin has on paper been able to maintain power via quote unquote legitimate means, right? Okay. So even when like he couldn't be the man in power, what he did was he made himself a position that was effectively the man in power. And then there was a legitimate election where somebody else was voted so that they took that spot then. And then after that, when he had the the consecutive term limit situation, like go out the window, then he just ran again, right? So what you don't want in the world stage in the current geopolitical situation is to be a world power and to have the explicit context that you had to rule by a military thumb. What you want to do is have it like in an implicit situation like Vladimir Putin did, right?
Why don't you want that?
because then people move against you, right?
Okay. Meaning
Right.
outside parties or
Outside parties and outside forces, right? So, for
yeah.
example, like let's say the United States becomes a military dictatorship. That's not going to happen, but let's just hypothetically say that's what happens, right?
Mm.
Then the people in power, the quote unquote oligarchs, if I'm keeping the parallels the same between Russia and the United States in this kind of conversation, right? Then the oligarchs start asking questions, right? Then the credit ratings start looking a little bit different. Then it becomes a little bit different for me to do international business. Then my supply chains get fucked up. Then we're no longer a safe haven like reserve currency. Then like you need a central banking system. Then all of the complexity becomes like, so like when you start like doing this kind of shit that like chips away at that, which Trump has already done
It's an
inadvertently.
ideal plan.
It's an unideal situation. So if I'm Trump and I'm trying to consolidate power under myself, I don't do a full on like autocratic like military kind of situation. I do what Vladimir Putin did, where like I can at least superficially say, nah, man, it's all legitimate, man. Like trust me, bro. I do that versus something that's as serious as I use the military to consolidate power. And that's in a situation where if you look at like how Russia put shit down, Russia deploys their military against citizens quiet as kept all the fucking time. Like these protests and shit that broke out right now, not happening in Russia. So I do think that, but I do also see that military force being escalated in LA as an example of like why I think that that's the blueprint that he's following and not the blueprint of something a bit more extreme. Not saying that that's not extreme, but I do think
Yeah.
that's a sliding scale of extremeness. But I think he's more
Yeah.
Vladimir Putin than anybody else.
Okay. One, if you've covered everything, one, that doesn't seem like the example of what you're saying it is, because when I think of Vladimir Putin exactly in the ways that you've said, this motherfucker's like done in a way that we in the West know about, shit tons of just military shit against the populace and straight up assassinations against like detractors. So that seems on that sliding scale, there's at least the cover of legitimacy, but a whole bunch of the military chicanery shit that I'm talking about, which seems not dissimilar to the two other examples that I gave.
I think Putin in those situations has had a level of plausible deniability. Like people kind of know, but they don't know
That
kind of
Duterte has
situations.
not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. And then my second
Whether or
question
not
is,
that matters, I think is a conversation.
that's going to be, well, that's kind of slightly related to my second question, which is, are you simply saying that that's the more effective strategy? Or are you saying that you think that that's what Trump's strategy is going to be? And if the latter, why?
I think it is both more effective, and I think it's Trump's strategy because I think he views it as more effective as well. And I think it's because it gives you the veneer of the world leaders that want to deal with you having plausible deniability for dealing with you. So it allows them to remain legitimate, right? So like when the France PM shakes Putin's hand, he can say, "Well, he was
Can
elected
I just
legitimately."
stop you before you go further into this one? Because this seems like you're
Yeah,
making the argument that it is Trump's idea because it is the better one, and then you're kind of giving reasons for that first one. My interest is the second thing, which is, why do you think Trump is that smart?
I think that Trump, based on comments that we know he's had,
Okay. Yes.
understands how people think at a base level better than
Mm.
we give him. Do I think he's some sort of geopolitical genius? Do I think he can map out how
You think he's
ballistic
pretty
missiles
solid
and
though, based on what he said?
I don't think he fully under comprehends how ballistic missiles in Tel Aviv are going to impact the geopolitical position of the United States. I don't think he fully understands how tariffs and like shutting down immigration from East Africa like impacts like the geopolitical standpoint of the world. Like I don't think he understands that kind of shit. But when he says stuff like, when you're a superstar, they can just like you can just do whatever you want. I think he understands how the systems favor him in very specific circumstances,
And wants to
and I
maintain
think that
that.
he extrapolates that
Okay.
to try to use that base level knowledge in like geopolitical realms to varying degrees of success. but I think that he has an understanding at a base level of how people tend to operate in the Western world that I think is underrated.
Okay, so
based on stuff he's actually said, like he'll just say like, yeah, I 100% I can do this shit, and they're gonna let me do this shit, and I'm
and
like,
they do, they will, yeah. Okay, no, okay.
The example that I give is all the time is I'm so far ahead that I can't tell you how far ahead I am.
I don't know what that means. Like, that's a bar, but I don't know what that means.
That's what 2 weeks before the general election. And everybody was like, "Oh, it's going to be a close one. Oh, it's going to be this." He's like, "I'm so far ahead, you guys. I can't. They don't want me to tell." He leaned to him. They don't want me to tell you that. I can't. They don't want me to come on TV and tell you that. But I'm so far ahead. It's crazy.
Yeah, but he said that when he lost.
Bananas. You know. He said it differently when he lost. When he lost, he said
that's retrospective
that the results
shit.
were
Like
fraudulent. He said that the results were fraudulent.
Yeah,
like
but
when you come out and you say like, no, I'm that's different. But anyway, all that.
But your other points I agree with you.
Yeah, I think he has some level of understanding. That I think he can make a value judgment on whether or not he thinks something is a good strategy versus not a good strategy. Whether or not that is, I think we all kind of have to wait and see. But I think that he thinks. Also, he also has spoken very favorably of Putin and Putin's leadership style, like in very direct quotes from that perspective. Yeah. So I think that he thinks that the Putin route is the way to do it. Like, I think he'd rather run the country the way Putin runs Russia.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. So he's a not quite as good of a geopolitical manipulator as you, but like better than, say, a Bernie.
Yes.
Okay.
Because Bernie's horrible. This is gonna be, and I like.
He's
Bernie.
A good guy. He's a good motherfucker. Seems like a good person, trying to help people.
I phone bank for Bernie multiple times at this point. Like, I'm a huge Bernie Sanders supporter. The motherfucker's a horrible.
That motherfucker keep telling the truth.
Same with AOC. AOC is a great person and a horrible politician.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense.
She's also not going to be on the podcast now. We probably could have made that happen if I didn't. Actually, just cut this one.
We can just cut
this.
This is all AOC on here. We can get AOC. We can get Bernie. We can get Ilhan. I'm trying to get all of them on. You know what I'm saying? So yeah.
It's a red flag.